You're listening to the Business of Pharmacy podcast with me, your host, Mike Kelzer. James, for those who haven't come across you online, introduce yourself and tell our listeners what we're talking about today.
So my name is James Lott. I'm a pharmacist and also the founder and CEO of Scripted.co by Script Health. Today we're going to be talking about the future of pharmacy and how Scripted aims to take a very large role in that future.
I was on your site, Scripted. That's a nice looking website focused on pharmacist prescribing. Now, the average person listening will say, well, pharmacists can't prescribe in general.
I'll tell you about the first transaction that ever happened using our platform, Scripted. Yeah. So we partner with the pharmacy on the West Coast. This pharmacy is in a rural area. A patient went to their local doctor's office, and that patient knew she had a urinary tract infection, very common in women. So she didn't have an appointment, walked in, and the doctor said, I'm sorry, but I can't see you for 3 weeks. The patient was a little bit, frustrated, but went to her local pharmacist, like lots of patients would. And she grabbed some Azo, an over-the-counter medication to kind of relieve the bladder pain, and took it to the pharmacist and was like, hey, does this work? The pharmacist says, well, it's okay, but actually, we just started this new program called Scripted. Why don't you scan this QR code here, answer some questions about your health, and if you're eligible, I can actually write you a prescription for an effective antibiotic. The patient completed the questionnaire. The pharmacist logged in, used the Scripted platform. She was able to comfortably and easily assess that this patient was in fact eligible under a protocol to get an antibiotic for her UTI. The patient paid a cash price to the pharmacist for the visit, which is different than normal. And then the pharmacist was able to charge the patient or bill the patient's pharmacy insurance for the medication. Now, obviously this patient was relieved, but also the pharmacist made money. And it's like this transaction was seamless and easy. Our question is, with something so obvious and so win-win for patients and pharmacists, how can we scale this kind of experience to every zip code in the United States?
The pharmacist there, he or she already knew that they were going to be able to prescribe. They already had that association with the doctor outside of your program. Is that right?
In this particular case, the pharmacist didn't actually need a doctor because this was actually in Idaho. But in many states, they do.
Gotcha.
That's a great question because so many pharmacists, everybody has that question. Who's a doctor? Well, we're going a step further. We're actually removing that. If you need a doctor to help you with a protocol or a collaborative practice agreement, we even help with that. All of the barriers that are in the way from getting our pharmacists to the future of pharmacy, we're taking them on one by one and removing those barriers and that friction so that pharmacists can do this at scale. And that is so absolutely important.
What was the thing that was the biggest disappointment as you got this going?
Sometimes your biggest failures or letdowns are your greatest strengths. I'm a pharmacist. I do not have a business background. I literally remember I was very fortunate. I got to go to a great school. So after pharmacy school, I went back to policy school. But when I was in policy school at the University of Chicago, at the time, there was the business school there, the Booth School of Business. And I remember entering a competition there. And I told the professors about my idea, and there were some questions I had. And one of those professors, when I asked the question, was so stupid. The professor literally kind of laughed at me and rolled her eyes and then answered it. And I will never forget how that felt. So like everybody else, I'm not a business person. But at the time, my idea was to try to solve the opioid crises. And I launched this platform, Naloxone Exchange, where people could go online, buy naloxone, and get it shipped to their door. The business idea was for a business. For a few people, it was great, but to scale to be a national brand, that wasn't really happening. But it was timing. Timing was right. One time we had the White House actually call us. The White House called us. They wanted to know more. We told them all of our challenges. We thought they were going to help us. The biggest issue in the opioid crises. And we have this thing where we could ship medication to all 50 states. The government's going to help us. Absolutely not. That never happened. That never happened. And when I realized that, no one's going to save you when you're tackling a problem. No one's going to save you. You have to solve your own problems.
Yeah.
That was a big wake up call. And it challenged me to form a better business model. And we got connected to some of the right people, some decision makers at the large chains. And they kind of, said, hey, there's this other problem where you guys could probably, figure out how to solve this, and it would create a lot of economic value for everybody if you could figure out how to, put pharmacists more into the, into the hierarchy of the care system.
Is this mainly you that's running things, or do you have another we as part of this that's trying to push this forward?
I'm lucky I'm not at the point where I'm the CTO and the CMO anymore.
Wow, that's great.
Thanks. That was back in the naloxone exchange days. But today, no, we're a completely different company. We have a team. We are funded. We've raised money from investors. We've finished accelerator programs. Some of these investors are some of the same investors from Uber and PillPack. So we do have a team. We are funded. And luckily this team is wonderful. These are physicians. These are product owners who study human-centered design. So they kind of take the problems from the pharmacists. So, when we first started developing this, I told them, hey guys, look, pharmacists are busy and they don't want to hear, if you tell them to do one more thing, they're going to take a pill bottle and throw it at you. They don't want to do anything else. So, we need to develop something that they're going to be proud to use and proud to help their patients, because let's also be honest. It's not that pharmacists don't want to help people. They really do, but they want to help themselves too. And sometimes their employers are not always stepping up and doing their part. One big part of this future of pharmacy, because there's so many question marks, is how are we going to get to the future of pharmacy when we're just trying to get through today? And today is hard. We're understaffed. Our business model is not working for us. There's so many things to figure out.
James, you mentioned accelerator companies, which is a cool concept I've talked to some other startups about. What accelerator program was that? What company was that?
Sure. We actually did two more, I would say, higher end accelerator programs. First, we did SoftBank, which is an extremely competitive program. SoftBank is, if I'm not mistaken, it might be the largest investors in the world. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they are. They write typically checks of about $1 billion. I think their minimum used to be $100 million. But we got lucky, and when they were trying to diversify into early stage companies, we were one of the first ones on their radar. So we got lucky to be in their accelerator program. And then also we were in Techstars, which is a very well-known and established accelerator program. PillPack was one of their first healthcare deals.
Your site and app is really cool. A lot of thought, a lot of time, a lot of money went into it. But nowadays, some of this stuff can start pretty easily, but it looks like you and your team are fully committed to this.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And it's funny because you say it looks easy, but what you're looking at is you're looking at the consumer side.
Yes, and it's supposed to look easy. If they've done a good job, they've built it around the consumer. Exactly.
Now, where the magic and for us, the nightmare comes in is the side for the pharmacists. Because essentially the way it works is someone can go on to scripted.co, enter their zip code, and select the treatment that they want. And again, these are things that are like, low risk for pharmacists or the healthcare system to undertake, but high touch. UTI, erectile dysfunction, asthma refills, COVID tests, etc. But the patient just wants to, get started and save time, so they can go online, start filling out the form, select an appointment time, and then go to their local pharmacy and execute the service. Now, the pharmacist is that, what they need is completely different. They want to be able to see the form. They want to be able to, to document this. They want to bill for the service. It needs to fit into their workflow. they might need to report all these services to the government or to insurance or to county or whatever the case may be. There's a lot.
Yeah, right.
And so we actually spend a ton of time working with, in my opinion, some of the most motivated and best, pharmacists in the country to develop this out. And it's really, really exciting.
How do you get input from the pharmacists at this point? Are these pharmacists / customers already on it? Are these people that have taken a look at betas and are giving their opinion? How do you get that input from the pharmacist that's valuable to you?
A couple of things. Number one, I always tell my team, you have to be customer obsessed. Mm-hmm. When you're customer obsessed, you're solving problems for them and they inherently get value for it. Mm-hmm. So our first customer, we didn't charge very much. We're still not charging very much. But all of these are paying customers. And these are customers that are very serious. They're very serious about being successful and keeping their lights on. Okay. Right now, these are mostly independents, although some chains have contacted us for sure because they are interested in what we're doing. But right now, we focus on these high performing visionary pharmacists who are leaders in their communities, in the pharmacy community, to leverage the platform and provide what the future is. I've heard things like, you guys are dumbifying this for other pharmacists. You're making this seamless. You're creating, something that, in 10 years when the pharmacy completely does transition, this is going to be the main tool that we're going to be using. So, they get to develop what they would need to be successful. And then we get to, bring that to life for them.
There's probably no one better to get an opinion from than someone who's actually paying for it already. They're going to give you some good opinions if they're putting money out for it.
I do agree, but I don't think we're charging much at all. And that's kind of the goal. We want to be the solution of choice for all of these pharmacists. And also, I have to read a lot of data. Pharmacists, the average independent pharmacy makes about $3.5 million in revenue a year. Now, how much profit? That's a different story. But revenue, that's pretty substantial. So, at the prices we're looking at, this is we make the decision super easy for them.
If you could cut your desires down into percentages, how much of a percent was this goal of scripted? How much of it was helping the patient versus you doing something that was really cool versus you loving technology versus you wanting to make money from it versus you wanting to leave a legacy? All these kind of things go into these new businesses. How much of a percent were some of those things, or are some of those things?
Man, that's a very good question. It's a hard one to answer. When LeBron James picked up a basketball, and I'm not saying I'm LeBron James, I can't even dunk, okay? So I'm not LeBron James, but when he picked up a basketball, things just seemed to make sense for him probably. He was really good at it, okay? Mm-hmm. And it fit with probably his value alignment. I would say the same thing happened to me. I did not pick pharmacy. Pharmacy picked me, and I'm really fortunate to find it. I remember when I was a pharmacy student, I did a rotation at ASHP, and it was a really competitive rotation to get. And I remember one of my last meetings with the outgoing president of ASHP. He was a wonderful man. And we sat in a room with him for an hour and a half, me and 3 other pharmacy students. And at the end of the meeting, he pulled me aside and said, "Hey, James, I don't know what it is about you, but I think you're going to save our profession." I don't know why he said that to me. I don't know if I believe that. That's not my goal to try to save the profession, but everything that has ever happened to me in the pharmacy setting has been remarkable and interesting, and it's been a calling, and I've always answered the call, and it's always made me feel good. I used to call myself a social entrepreneur, which is somebody who's mission oriented. I stopped calling myself that because investors think that you don't know anything about business and you're going to lose all their money, which is fair.
Sure.
But I've had to learn a lot. I've had to take the social part off because I validated that there's a social benefit here. There's an economic value. There's a savings. There's an access. There's all these things. And I feel so lucky that our team has been able to put together a product and a business model that solves so many problems all at once.
Have you come across any roadblocks of not just like things you have to do? Is anybody trying to stop this?
I think at a high level, there probably are people who probably don't want this to be, a reality. And that's why intention matters so much. And I have a lot of questions to why this may never come into fruition in the first place. Future of pharmacy has become such a buzzword. And Mike, I know because I've been paying attention, but, here's the bigger question. What's the plan to get there? Who has the answer of how we're going to get to the future of pharmacy? What does that even look like? Better, who is advocating for this? Who is the leader in implementing these things? I don't think anybody's figured that out. And that's the problem. Another thing, it's like when you're trying to shift an industry, fragmentation is your biggest adversary, but coordination is your biggest weapon. And if we're going to go to the future of pharmacy, we all have to go there in the same direction. The reason that COVID was such a big win for pharmacists was because we did 229 million vaccines delivered by pharmacists. That's according to the CDC. Over 100 million tests. And an Express Scripts study says that 91% of people feel confident pharmacists can give vaccines. And then 74% of people, this is the general public, feels pharmacists are capable of prescribing. So with that, everything is there. But the one question is, how are we going to get there? How are we going to get to the future of pharmacy? And that's what Scripted we've been busting our butts trying to figure out.
Sometimes when you've got more of those buzzwords like the future of pharmacy, it's because somebody doesn't know the future. The current stuff is hard to do. It's like people giving a rousing speech and saying there's a brighter light and a brighter future. It's like, that's because things are pretty dark right now. So if there was a clear road, you might be talking more about, all right, here's what we're doing. Here's what we're going to do tomorrow. Here's what we're going to do next year. And sometimes the future is kind of nebulous out there, so it's easy to talk about.
I completely agree. Yeah. And we're, we're working with customers who, if I'm being honest, a lot of these people, they're so smart and motivated, they can figure this out for themselves. And I honestly, I wish that there was more of a spotlight in our profession on these pharmacists that I'm talking with, because the naysayers of the profession, they might feel really bad, for complaining when they see these people and how bright their lights are about the profession. Now, granted, there are completely different scenarios. These are independently owned pharmacists who set up their own, they set up their own culture. They set up their schedules, etc. They're not in control. They're in complete control of these versus our community friends who, are, they're really just trying to make it through the day sometimes, which is super unfortunate. But these folks they're still really, really, really doing great work in their communities. These independent pharmacy owners, some of them that we're working with, and just extremely inspiring. They're so inspiring.
A master's in public policy. Do I have that right?
Yeah.
How did that come? You went to pharmacy school and then decided you're going to go back for a master's in this?
Yeah. I've never told this story before, but okay. So when I was a pharmacist, I legitimately loved my job. And I had there was a stint where, I had a mentor who was my boss, and she was amazing. And she decided to leave the company at a large chain. She said she didn't like what the future held. This was like 2015, 2016, maybe. And I got this new boss, and, this was a non-pharmacist, someone who was just stepping into the role and probably didn't know what to do with somebody like me. Somebody who's extremely ambitious and assertive and this and that. probably felt intimidated. I got, long story short, we had some disagreements. I was disciplined, and I didn't like the way that felt, because I knew I was just doing what was best for my patients and my team members. So I was like, I don't know if I want to be a part of something like this.
What does a discipline mean in that regard?
This, again, is kind of back to the opioid crisis. We were, in our area, we were getting a lot of fake prescriptions. I called all the pharmacy managers at the stores near me to figure out if they were having the same issues as us. And they said, yeah. And I asked them what they did. And they were like, oh, well, we check IDs. We have signs put up that we check ID, and it deters a lot of it. And I was like, oh, okay, great idea. So I did the same thing. My boss told me to remove the sign. We couldn't check IDs. And I was like, well, if somebody filled that script, illegally, I'm pretty sure you want to fire me. So what am I supposed to do here? But long story short, I called the company to clarify to see if it was okay. And I think that she might have gotten alarmed that I had called the company. I wasn't trying to, go after her. I just wanted to validate so I can keep everybody safe. But she retaliated. My boss retaliated, and I got demoted from my store and manager and sent into the float pool. And
really?
Yeah, that didn't make me feel good.
That was your discipline. They yank you out of there and put you in the float.
But also at the same time, I was looking to do something different. I actually, I went to mid-year. I tried to do the fellowship interviews. I got pretty far in it. Didn't quite make it. And then I saw, I was like, there was only two options for me: to go into industry potentially, or to go back to school and figure things out. But I knew if I was going to go back to school, it needed to be, a school that, the name spoke for itself. You were going to be around some of the smartest, most ambitious people in the world. And I found that at University of Chicago. University of Chicago is kind of funny. It's so elite that only the elite people know about it. They say the smartest people in the world don't go to Harvard or Stanford. They go to University of Chicago.
Is that right?
Yeah, which is a better question, because I don't know why they let me in. But but it really is a really amazing school. It kind of fits my personality in some ways, because it's kind of low profile, but packs its weight for sure, and very rigorous for sure. So
now, James, you weren't disciplined to the point where you weren't employable as a community pharmacist, right? You pulled yourself out of that market then. Yeah,
kind of. And I mean, I guess not entirely. I still worked for a couple more years. I worked as a manager at another company. I kind of had this reputation for being a turnaround pharmacy. You send me to your worst store and I'll fix it up and get it right. I'll put the policies and compliance, and I'll get people motivated again. That was nice. They paid me a lot of money to do that, actually.
The master's in public policy. Interesting, good choice. Would you have chosen something else in retrospect, or was it the right place to spend a couple years' time?
University of Chicago was the right school for me. I'm not sure if the master's in public policy program was, not sure for me personally, I had a ton of value. I actually, while I was at U Chicago, I spent a ton of time at the business school. And if I hadn't thought that, if I hadn't been, completely incorrect in thinking that business is immoral and wrong and capitalistic society is terrible, I probably would have pursued a business degree and not a policy degree. But luckily, U Chicago is versatile enough to allow people to get multitude of experiences. So I took like 4 classes at the business school and kind of created my own degree. So yes, it was public policy, but also integrated with a lot of foundational business perspective as well. So
you've kind of changed the mission of your endeavor to take the word social out of it. You said that your view on business kept you out of the MBA program, and here you are now, a business person. That's like a triple whammy. So where did the strength come against business, and where was that turning point for you to say that you were wrong?
I love that question. Well, I was wrong because of my own experiences. If you bust your butt and your job demotes you and your community loves you and your employees love you, you just feel like, oh, and you're like, that's just how the world works. But the problem is that man created that world. Man created that opportunity for that to happen. Like that's a man-made structure that is a big flaw. But the thing is, people make businesses. So because people make businesses, you could create your own business in your own culture where you treat people well. You make them feel special every single day. You celebrate them when they come and work for you. This is one of the biggest reasons right now in pharmacy that the perspective is so bleak because people are not being celebrated. Shout out to Bled to Know. She just took on one of the most important fights of our professions in the last 100 years. I am so thrilled to be able to, we're forming a relationship. She's really wonderful, but I'm embarrassed by our profession that one person has to take on that much burden and speak out for everybody. But luckily, more people are stepping up, and the impact that she and others are making is starting to definitely show up.
When I spoke with Bled on the show, we were joking about how that when I've made some more minor decisions in my career, that some people will say to you, it's like, oh, you must get a lot of support from that. And Bled and I laughed. It's like, well, she hasn't gotten like a ton of job offers coming your way. Some people might say, hey, way to go, but it's risky. And yeah, the offers might come for people in that situation, but a company's not going to throw a bunch of money at you just because they support the cause or the social cause. They need to make sure there's dollar signs behind hiring you. And it's risky to step out like that. And, way to go, Bled.
Way to go, Bled. And here's what I will also say. It is because I was a social entrepreneur and I saw all of the challenges behind that, I never got away from that core of wanting to do better. Just the structure and the business economics of it had to look different at the end of the way. And that's what I would challenge anyone to do. If you have like that pure heart, that bleeding heart for change, you can definitely make a lot of noise doing it the social entrepreneurship way. But if you want it to be sustainable and scalable to everywhere, you have to think about the business aspect. You have to.
For sure.
It's the only way to make sure it lives on forever. And that's what I have had to condition myself to figure out over the last several years. And I'm really proud of what we've been able to do.
You even see it with things like, let's say that you have sprinkling at your house, underground sprinkling, let's say, and the one company you get every year to, let's say, winterize your sprinkling costs X, and you can find another company who's kind of a younger company. Maybe it's a guy with a couple helpers and they started this up and so on. And maybe you can hire them every fall to do your sprinkler blowout. And it's like 0.6X or something like that. So the company's making money. It's not a social cause of blowing out sprinklers, but they're lower cost and things like that. And then like a year or two goes by and you call them up. There's no one on the other line. They didn't charge enough money even to be a sprinkler blowout company. And it's like, all right, I guess I have to pay X because X is what it's going to cost to keep a company in business so that they're there year after year after year. The companies have to make the profit to be sustainable.
Exactly. Again, I know pharmacists are versatile and we're smart, but not all of us, I would say the majority of us, we don't have business acumen. And it is not our fault, but it's definitely our responsibility to figure that out. The pharmacists that complain a lot about the current state, I empathize with you so much. I'm a community pharmacist first before anything else, but the business, it's not sustainable. I was looking at a recent study that shows healthcare costs in the top 10 expenditures in healthcare. And of the 10 expenditures, all of the healthcare costs rose except one. You want to guess what that was?
Medicine. Prescription
drug services. Yep. The only one of the top 10 expenditures in healthcare that was going down is prescription drugs. CVS is closing down 900 stores. Walgreens is closing down a substantial amount of stores. There's proof everywhere that the business is not working. And again, I understand completely what it feels like, but the only savior that I see are, clinical services, because that margin that is potentially predictable and mostly profit, you can't really compete with that versus drugs. You might make $2 here, negative $3.50 there, $6 there. That's not, nobody's winning from that. We haven't even factored in the competition, online competition, which is about to become enormous. So we already have declining profitability, and Amazon and Mark Cuban haven't even put their foot on the gas yet. So the trends are not in our favor. They're not in our favor. Now, am I completely, am I going with the doom and gloom perspective? No, but only because I'm optimistic. But there is a case for that. If pharmacists don't shift quickly to this new business opportunity of providing care for common conditions at scale, then yeah, the future could look very, very bleak. And a lot of pharmacy folks are going to be jobless, and a lot of communities are not going to be very healthy. So we got to get a hold on this quickly. And again, the whole buzzword of future of pharmacy, we need to be on the same path together. We don't have time to waste.
It does come quickly. I mean, all of us can remember, well, old farts maybe, we can all remember, it seems like yesterday when you were going to Blockbuster and looking around for videos and so on. It's quick. It happens quickly.
Absolutely.
Talking about businesses and how you got a bad taste in your mouth, because of this one manager. And boy, it makes me think too, kind of the opposite way of how I'll sit there and bitch about the PBMs. And I think as a whole, I think PBMs are evil. What they're doing, opaque PBMs, what they're doing to pharmacists and patients and things like that. But in general, when you look at individual employees, it's kind of the opposite of what you were saying. In my mind, I've got this evil business, but each individual person you pull out of there is kind of a nice person. And they don't, as an individual, they don't set up all these policies. It comes from groupthink and a board and investors and all that stuff that really make that whole industry evil. But it's interesting how you can come at it from so many different angles, because on your side, the one person made this maybe a benign industry seem evil. And in my case, in looking at the PBMs, it's like there's this evil industry and one person could kind of make it look good on an individual level. So, boy, there's so much there about our perceptions because of what we're dealing with on a local level.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. And I know folks in the PBM space, and these folks are bright. that machine is it attracts some bright people, probably because the business model is absolutely genius. However, that business model is extremely toxic in what it does to industries and pharmacists and even, sometimes even patients. It's like, yeah, I don't even know. I have so many emotions and thoughts on that.
Sometimes part of my staff and I will connive about how we can screw the PBMs back, by these little tricks we have, everything legal, but if we can find a loophole and things like that. But I joke with my staff, I'm like, we think we're conniving? The PBM hires the best damn connivers you could think of. So when you say someone's bright, do you mean they're bright at being shifty? Is that what you're getting at? They're bright at knowing how to screw people? Or do you see a brighter talent other than just screwing people?
I think that's well taken. I think that these people are bright for business. If you put these people in a room to solve problems, they're going to come up with an answer. And I also know these people, and when they're doing their job, they're not thinking about how it's going to impact, small town USA pharmacy. They're just thinking about how to make more profit because that's the problem that they were given to solve.
My nephew, he's like a freshman in college, and we were sitting around with our family camping a couple years ago, and I think he likes to rile the uncles up and stuff, but he said that he was smarter than Einstein was. And we're like, Danny, you're not smarter than Einstein. He's like, yeah, I am, because he said, I can pull up my phone and I can do all this stuff. And he said, Einstein didn't know all that. I'm like, yeah, but Einstein can think better than you can, Dan. And he's like, no, because IQs go up, 10 points every generation and this and that. So I'm smarter than Einstein. I said, you're not smarter than Einstein. But here's what I was thinking, though, a couple weeks ago. I've got like this narcissistic attitude that I think I'm smarter than a lot of people. And I have no way to prove that. And if someone seems to be smarter than me, I always shrug it off as saying, well, they're smart in that field, But how do you tell when you say someone is smart? How do you know that? When you say a business person is smart, how do you make that judgment? Why do you say that? Because I'm trying to bring myself down a few notches with some humility, and maybe I can learn from you.
No, that's a good question. I think that from my own perspective, when someone is smart at business, and I think that you can be smart at different things. You can be smart at basketball. You can be smart at, gardening. But when you're smart at business, especially when it comes to these things, you're able to take large amounts of, inputs, data, systems thinking, and be able to digest that, understand it, and come out with solutions that will focus on sustainability. What I think needs to happen is that we need some of these smart people to work with independent pharmacies so that we could figure out ways to move them forward and, kind of take some of the things that they're doing that are working, double down on it, and then kind of scale that across the board. So we need some of that smartness to come back in our industry. And there's another really big problem in our industry. Our industry is mostly led by large chain pharmacies whose business model is completely different from everybody else's.
Yeah.
Their business model is to bring patients in the store at any cost and just get them to spend money anywhere. It doesn't matter where they spend money, just spend money because we're going to make margins on all of them. If the pharmacy is the ration for them to come into the store, then they have succeeded.
Part of their game plan can be to say, we're smart chain people, and over the next 5 years, we predict that we're going to get an extra, 300% foot traffic. In order to do that, we have to do A, B, and C, and D is finding ways to lower the reimbursement of, our prescriptions. We're going to lower it on purpose because that's going to help that 300% foot traffic to come in. So they don't care. They see the big picture. They don't care what the pharmacy reimbursement is. I mean, I don't know the ins and outs, of course, but in general, they can say if they're going to make it on, helium balloons or on, greeting cards or something like that, if all of a sudden that's a big market, they'll sell out pharmacy. They don't care.
Unfortunately, you're probably correct.
I'm back on the smart people here. All right. So it might be a situation where you've heard the same input they do, and all of a sudden they say to you, James, here's how you look at it, blah, blah, blah. And then you're like, oh, yeah, I didn't think about it that way, right? You're kind of comparing apples to apples, and they might come up with something that you don't even think about.
That's absolutely correct. And in fact, some of my ambitions have been to understand like how a company like GoodRx works. A very common question amongst people who have time to think or just kind of care about these systems is like, GoodRx, how do they make money? And if you kind of go on the back end, a lot of them is kind of all of this finagling and all of these like kind of complex, and strategic connecting with PBMs and contracts and loopholes And that's how they're able to make money without a very sophisticated product. It's just something that it's a loophole and connecting contracts that have and extracting the margin from it to make profit for themselves. And so again, like this is something I ask my PBM friends, but they they teach me a lot more than that, for sure. I am, and maybe this is where me being naive sometimes comes in, but I think I am cautiously optimistic that we'll eventually get some type of handle on, what PBMs are doing to independent pharmacies over the next decade. But I guess the better question would be, do we even have a decade to battle with them? Do we have a decade to battle with PBMs? A lot of people would probably, be mad at me for saying that. And I think that's fair too. But I just believe in people who are passionate and serious about solving problems when they all kind of come together collectively to solve the problems that they have.
In Michigan, they just passed a PBM law like 2 days ago, and it's not going into effect till like 2024 and 2025. And that just seems, it's not a decade, it's like a year and a half. It seems too far away even.
Right.
Here's what sucks about these smart PBM people is, you said it yourself, they're these smart PBM folks, and they can break stuff down and make it look easy. They use that skill to make it opaque. They use their brains to understand how to make it smoke and mirrors and make it more complicated, because that's their key to all this. They can take something easy, make it complicated, and then sell it as a complicated thing to politicians. And, when you're selling it to corporation owners to buy insurance and so on, their goal is to make it as confusing as they can. And so the smart minds who can break down anything have used that skill and talent to make it the most confusing market in the world.
And defensible.
Because it's so confusing, no judge can pick it apart, right?
Absolutely. It's so complex that it requires an enormous amount of expertise to even understand what's actually happening.
I was talking to one of the guys on our team, and I was saying that they're like, well, is this Michigan law going to solve everything? I'm like, I don't know. We might even get the same reimbursement, but I said, I think what it does is it starts to chip away at that confusion, so instead of a DIR fee, it's like they have to get that up front, and instead of this and that fee, they can't do it then, they got to do it here. So it's one step maybe in clearing, at least making things transparent, at least letting people see you getting screwed by them and they know what's happening.
Yeah.
James, what's your biggest weakness in all of this?
That's a great question. So, Mike, I'm gonna be honest. This is hard. This is really, really hard. Every time you think you figure something out, they throw another curveball at you. You would think that you just put some software together. You say, here you go, use it. And, you've done your job as a founder. You've done your job as a CEO. That's not what's happening. Pharmacy is the most regulated profession in one of the most regulated industries.
Mm-hmm.
And you have 50 states and 50 different laws. And every pharmacy needs a solution that works for them, but also works for other pharmacies that look completely different. And it's just like the amount of grit that it takes to kind of, again, go into this future that we're trying to provide. Sometimes I wonder if the cost is more than I actually have in the tank, Mm-hmm. So you have to love it. I do, but it doesn't make it any more challenging. This is definitely challenging.
How would that present itself in you? Would you get burned out? Would you get depressed? Would you get anxious because you can't handle it all? Does it bring you down at all because of those challenges?
I've taken my licks from this. That's for sure. This has taught me a lot about myself and, about the importance of like, you know, drawing lines in the sand for my personal life so that I can, you know, keep this going and be the leader that my team needs me to be, because this takes a unique leader. You can't just throw any CEO in this dragon fight and expect them to come out, you know, winning. So I have had to learn how to be able to take care of myself and also like this company at the same time, because we're not just, it's not even a company. This is a movement. This is something that we need the entire community to adopt this approach. And once that happens, then we know that we're on the right path. But having customers here, customers there, like, you know, this is some, you know, product like a laundry detergent product. And no, that's not what you need. We need the entire community to get behind this for this to work. Otherwise, you know, it's not going to. So
what's a tempting barrier when you talk about a boundary? What's a tempting barrier for you that you're like, oh, I know I would maybe feel good momentarily if I could do this, if I could go beyond this barrier I've set for myself, this boundary. But you say, every time I cross the damn boundary, though, I get hurt. You know, I get less of me. What boundary is that temptation that you feel like you want to give more of sometimes, but you know you have to stop yourself?
So I see myself as a disciplined person, and a lot of the wins that I've had in life is because of my discipline. When you work at a startup, a lot of things change, and this is a beast that you haven't ever seen before. You're creating something in the world that's never existed, and the world's first response is to reject it, but you have to convince the world otherwise. And so that's hard. And when you're doing that, you got to take time for yourself so that you can rest up, recharge, and, you know, go back. But also I'm a non-technical founder, which means I don't know how to code, but I have to convince, you know, these expensive developers to develop my vision for the world. And how are you going to do that without working 100 hours a week? So I worked hundreds of hours a week for years now. That takes a toll on you for sure, right? To try to make this thing come to life and try to change people's minds. And we're getting traction now, but definitely at a cost of me and all of my early employees. But, you know, this is, again, why I try to push for such a healthy culture in our company. And I have a great team that helps me do it as well. We care about each other. We try to take care of each other.
Do you ever feel lonely?
Being a founder is incredibly lonely, for sure. There's no doubt about it. I'm okay, but it's incredibly lonely. It's just, there's not that many people in the world who understand what you do. And when people see you, they just see you for what you put out in the world. They're not, you know, they don't check up on you, which is luckily I have friends that do. They care about me. They check up on me. But yeah, being a founder is incredibly difficult and hard. That's why most founders have co-founders. They have, you know, 2 or 3 people that they have tried to, that they've come up with the idea with. And even them, they're still lonely, but less so than being like a sole founder. So
it's interesting you say that. Do you have that? Do you consider yourself a sole founder?
I'm a sole founder, correct.
I was talking to, I think it was Flavio from Troy Medicare. I was talking to him and I was telling him how I would hate to have a co-founder in terms of, I just want to be my own guy and just do my thing. And he was saying that exactly what you said. It's really interesting you brought that up, because he said it's lonely with those kind of hours, and a co-founder, if you're the person that would respond well to this, is someone to walk through some of that loneliness with you. James, What would be your message to a graduating class of pharmacists?
My message to them would be, it's going to be a combination of reality and hope. The reality is that our profession is struggling because of the decisions people that are not pharmacists have made about our profession, and we allowed them to. The hope is that we can fix this by being innovative and being valuable and helpful to our communities, doing things that are not counting pills, but helping patients in their own journeys to achieve health. And we're perfectly in line to do this for the simple stuff. And I want pharmacists to start taking a more active role in deciding what the future of their profession looks like.
Are they giving up any security, any dollars? Are we asking them not to be lazy? I mean, what are they giving up to carry this mission out?
In the current world today, if you ask them to do this, I think that you'd have more people leave the profession, to be honest with you. They're tired. They're tired of these enormous expectations put on them without the tools to be successful. They need investment. They need investment into their future. And they need divestment from things that have never worked. Pharmacists should have always been helping out in the community and doing clinical stuff. They should have always been doing that. I don't know whose idea was that filling more prescriptions was going to be the answer. That was a bad idea. Now, again, we've done a lot of research and spent a lot of time working with pharmacists so that when they're asked to do more, they know that they're going to be supported with the right tools. Because again, I mean, I was just going back on social media maybe last week, and whenever I hear anybody ranting about the expectations and find the solutions, they often bring up clinical services, but then they immediately say, but they're asking us to do it without giving us tools.
That's the thing. Everybody can help, but it's like...
And wants to help. It's just this like nebulous, like, where do we start? It feels like everybody has to invent the wheel. And that's exactly why Scripted by Script Health exists today. We have the will. Here you go. Have fun using it. I think you're going to get a lot of enjoyment, and you're going to, on the other side of this is going to be a better version of yourself as a pharmacist. That's what we're going for.
Well, James, golly, you're putting out hope at scale. I'm eager to see what you come up with. It's a great looking site, and I can tell there's a lot of expertise that went into it to make it look simple from this end, which it's certainly not in reality. Great meeting you. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you so much for the opportunity here, Mike.
Fun talking to you, and we'll talk again. We'll be following closely.
We'll see you, friend.
You've been listening to the Business of Pharmacy podcast with me, your host, Mike Kelzer. Please subscribe for all future episodes.